Fluttershy's Giant, Part 6. Dog turned when he heard Fluttershy call his name. "I got something for you," she said, hopping forward with a smile on her face. He nodded his head and placed the manticore down. "Fix." Fluttershy trotted over to the manticore and inspected him. She looked up, eyes full of fear and misunderstanding. "He's dead," she whispered and backed away from the giant. Dog frowned and prodded the manticore. "Dead?" His voice resonated throughout the forest. Fluttershy nodded and backed even further away. The metal giant prodded the manticore's corpse again and picked it up. He began to shake it wildly, flinging its deceased body all over the place. "Wake up, wake up, wake up." "He's dead!" Fluttershy squealed and ran up to him, trying to get him to calm down. Dog dropped the corpse and backed away from her, looking at the giant hands with fear and disgust. "Monster, I killed." "No, it was an accident, I'm sure." Fluttershy cried and petted his giant metal foot. He looked at her sadly and huddled his knees to his chest. Fluttershy glanced around and felt a bead of sweat run down her face. "I, brought you some books to read. Do you like reading?" she said quietly. He tilted his head at her and inadvertently looked at the manticore again. He buried his face in his hands and shook violently. "Dog?" Fluttershy asked and peered up at him. His vision flickered and a reticle formed around the manticore. "No." He shook his head and looked down at her. "It was an accident, wasn't it?" she asked, on the verge of tears. "Oh, please say it was. Oh, please say it was." He nodded. She breathed a sigh of relief and smiled up at him. "Then it's all right. Sometimes accidents happen," she assured him. Then she leant over and nuzzled the top of his foot. He smiled and picked her up. She squealed and clutched his finger. When she realized she was safe, she stood up and shakily smiled at him. Thanks, dog, but you startled me." "Sorry." She smiled and nuzzled his finger. "Do you like books?" He nodded. "Books, stories, knowledge." "Well, if you could put me down, I'd like to read you some," she said with a shaky voice, still trying to smile as bravely as she could. He nodded again and gently placed her on the ground and hunkered down. She smoothed over her mane and picked up her saddlebag after dropping it when she saw the manticore. "Speaking of which, we should bury the poor dear," she murmured, gazing at the lifeless form of the manticore who tried to eat her. Some level of her was glad it was dead before she was, but she was still terribly sad. It probably had a family of its own. You know, just to be nice. Dog tilted his head. "Bury. Place him in the earth. It helps them find their happy hunting ground," Fluttershy explained sadly. "Sometimes things die and we have to bury them, even if they try to eat us." The giant sat and watched as she began to dig a hole for the manticore with her bare hooves. She took a deep breath and looked up at him. "You could help me, you know. I mean, if you want to." Dog nodded and used his finger as a scoop as he improved Fluttershy's digging skills tenfold. After a few words and a moment of silence, Fluttershy smiled up at Dog. "At least you're learning," she said. Dog nodded and laid on the ground, picking up the Pegasus and putting her on his chest, in the middle of the O. "Thank you. Now, this story is about a Pegasus. She's called Daring Do. In this story, she's trying to find a magical stone for her sick mother. She's kind of a superhero, Fluttershy explained. Fluttershy explained as she hunkered down on his chest. He raised his head and frowned. Superhero? Yes, she does super things because she's a hero. My friend Rainbow Dash is a kind of hero. We all are. Sort of. Fluttershy giggled. Dog is a superhero. Yes, if you want, you can be. She giggled again. He grinned and laid his head back down. Daring Dew in the Moonstone. Fluttershy read and began the story, beaming as he listened. Applebloom watched Fluttershy as she trotted back into the forest with a large grin on her face and a bulging saddlebag. What's she up to? The filly wondered. And why the heck is she going back in that place? Has she forgotten already? She shook her head and shivered. The memory of those pale green lights still terrified her, and she fought for control of her young bladder. Maybe I should get Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo and investigate, she murmured, as she watched her foal-sitter disappear into the dark woods. Yeah. She cantered off to find the other two crusaders and, possibly, rescue their foal-sitter. Fluttershy's doing what? Sweetie Belle squeaked at the doorstep. Applebloom sighed and straightened her bow. I told you, she's going back into the Everfree. She had her bag with her and it was big, bigger than usual. We gotta go save her. Sweetie scratched her head. What do you mean, save? That giant thing's still in there, remember? The eyes. Both girls shivered in memory. Where's Scootaloo? Applebloom asked. I think she's helping Miss Charlie out with something at school, Sweetie replied. Alright, let's go get her and then go save Fluttershy. Rarity! Sweetie shouted through the boutique. Came Rarity's voice from somewhere upstairs. I'm going out with Applebloom and Scootaloo. I'll be back later. That's nice, dear. Try not get any dirt in your mail coat. See you soon, Rarity called. The fillies left the store and galloped to the school, where they saw Scootaloo sitting outside on a bench. Oh, hi girls, what's up? The orange filly asked and hopped towards them. We're going to look for Fluttershy. You coming? Applebloom said bluntly. Scootaloo nodded. Sure, where is she? The Everfree, Sweetie said. Scootaloo froze. What? Why? She sputtered and backed away. Applebloom rushed to her side. It's alright, we'll be there too. And Fluttershy will be there when we find her. Yeah, you don't have to be scared, Sweetie piped up. Scootaloo puffed her chest up and flexed her wings. Who said I was scared? She said bravely. Applebloom sighed and shook her head with a grin. Oh, no, Pony. Come on, girls. The Cutie Mark Crusaders reached Fluttershy's cottage again and gasped at the ex-chicken coop with shock and horror. I didn't realize it was so bad looking, Applebloom murmured. Bad looking? I'll say. This place was totaled. This place was totaled last night, Scootaloo retorted as she prodded a plank of wood out of the way. Want to help build it? Sweetie asked hopefully, her voice breaking with fear. Instead of going back in the forest, we could just help build this coop again? Applebloom shook her head. And did Fluttershy get eaten by that giant? Oh yeah. Sweetie's tail drooped. They crept up to the edge of the forest and shivered, cowering in fear. Well, Scootaloo first. She's the bravest, Sweetie whispered. Scootaloo gulped. Just like Rainbow Dash, she murmured and entered the forest, dragging her friends in behind her. Fluttershy looked up from the book when she heard a twig snap. What was that? Dog sat up, cupping her in his hands. "It's alright, dog. I'm fine," she said as soothingly as possible, still trying to keep a calm head about things. He rose to his feet and looked around. "The tracks lead this way," a familiar voice said. "Oh, it's the girls from before. It's definitely fine now, dog." Fluttershy told him and breathed a sigh of relief. Dog growled and set her down again, then went clanking off in between some dark trees and hunkered down, as there he waited, watching the Pegasus and her friends with as little noise as possible. "Fluttershy!" Applebloom cried and jumped forwards. "We found you! Girls, she's over here!" Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo popped out of the bushes next and rushed forwards. "What are you freak doing here?" the butter yellow Pegasus asked, bewildered at the fact they had found her and not seen Dog, and amazed they were here. "Rescuing you, of course!" Sweetie cried happily as she buried her face in Fluttershy's pink mane. "Now come on, we have to go!" "We have to go!" What do you mean?" "What do you mean?" Fluttershy asked and pulled away from them. "I never needed rescuing." "Ah. Applebloom!" The Pegasus and Unicorn whined at the Earth Pony. "Oops, I guess she didn't then," Applebloom murmured and turned red. They glared at her and turned back to their foal sitter. "So what are you doing here in the forest all alone then?" Scootaloo asked suspiciously. "Oh, I'm not alone. I've got Dog," she said and instantly stuck a hoof in her mouth. "Who's Dog?" Sweetie asked and giggled. "Is he your boyfriend?" Fluttershy squealed and turned bright red. "No! At least I think not. He's just a friend, really. Oh, I must stop talking." She quickly glanced over to where Dog was hiding and turned back just as fast with the small hope none of them had seen him. Applebloom had. It's... she mumbled. "Now, girls, it's really nothing to be scared of." Fluttershy wailed as Dog came into full view, towering over the 4 ponies. Scootaloo froze in terror as Dog stared down at them. Giant!" she stammered. Dog suddenly lowered himself to their level and smiled, revealing his metal teeth. Fluttershy fluttered in front of him and tried to calm the girls down. "Girls, he's really friendly. Honest. Please don't." The fillies broke into tears and wailed in sheer terror. "Cry," Fluttershy whispered and covered her ears. "Oh, please stop," she gingerly mumbled as she felt her own tears brimming in her eyes. She glanced up at Dog imploringly and saw him reach a finger out. The filly shrieked and jumped back. "No, no! He wants to meet you." Fluttershy cried and flapped over to them, landing on Dog's finger. She leant down and nuzzled its metallic surface. "See?" Sweetie gingerly tiptoed forward bravely. "That's it. He's friendly, I promise," Fluttershy assured her. She gulped and extended a hoof, gently grazing the surface of his finger. "He's really friendly?" she whispered. Fluttershy nodded and fluttered down to her side. "Yes." Dog wiggled the end of his finger and nudged the filly. She giggled as he tickled her. "Quit it!" she cried. He grinned and tipped her on her back, tickling her without mercy. Sweetie Belle cried happily. "Girls, help! He's tickling me!" she yelled to her friends. Scootaloo and Applebloom also crept towards the metal giant, the friendly metal giant. "What is he?" Applebloom asked Fluttershy. "I don't think he remembers," Fluttershy said and gazed up at Dog. "He's like a child." Scootaloo jumped on his finger as he leant in close. "He's awesome! He's our very own giant robot! And we're like the luckiest kids in Equestria!" she cried happily. Fluttershy frowned. Oh, I don't think we should do anything with him. I was just reading him a story before, she told them. Really? What story? Apple Bloom asked as she patted Dog's finger. One of Rainbow's Daring Do books. They're really quite good, Fluttershy replied with a smile, and he likes them very much. He likes the idea of being a superhero. Scootaloo hopped off his finger. Well, of course they are, because Rainbow Dash likes them. Apple Bloom chuckled. Scootaloo scowled. Oh yeah, she muttered. Dog blinked at them and smiled. Hello. The girls stepped back when they heard his voice and hid behind Fluttershy. He talks? Sweetie stuttered. Fluttershy nodded. Oh yes, he can't quite form sentences yet, but he's getting there. Oh, she cried and slapped her forehead. I almost forgot. How rude of me. Girls, this is Dog. Dog, this is Sweetie Belle, Scootaloo, and Apple Bloom. She smiled as she introduced them. Scootaloo, Sweetie Belle, Apple Bloom. The giant smiled as he said their names. The girls nodded and smiled, albeit still quite scared of him. Howdy, Dog, Apple Bloom murmured. Hey, Fluttershy, don't you think Twilight should see him? Scootaloo asked. Fluttershy nodded. I was first just getting to know him. I'll show Twilight soon enough, though. Now come on, girls. Everfree is no place for you. Aww. The girls grumbled as she led them away. Wait. Dog stood up and held his hand on the ground, palm up. The girls looked at Fluttershy. She sighed and nodded. The Crusaders giggled as they hopped onto his hand, their foal-sitter in tow. Up we go! Apple Bloom cried happily. Dog grinned and rose his hand into the air. Whoa! Sweetie cried as she stumbled. Careful, Fluttershy warned, and quickly grabbed her before she could fall off. Thanks, Fluttershy. All four of the ponies felt the wind on their faces as Dog moved through the trees away from Ponyville. Fluttershy noticed this but said nothing. Maybe he's just taking us on an adventure, she thought. So what does Dog eat, Shy? Apple Bloom asked. Fluttershy furrowed her brow. I don't know. Do you even eat, Dog? He shook his head in response. The Crusaders frowned. Well, you gotta eat something, cried Apple Bloom. Everybody's got to eat. Scootaloo coughed. Well, Apple Bloom, in case you haven't noticed, he isn't a pony. He's a giant robot. Fluttershy smiled a little as they started to bicker. Now, girls, please. Sorry, Fluttershy, they responded and hung their head in shame. The butter-colored Pegasus remembered something very important. By the way, girls, you mustn't tell any pony about this. Not Rarity or Rainbow Dash. Not Applejack. No one. No pony, okay? She asked and loomed over them. Sure, Fluttershy, they mumbled and turned back into the wind. Why? Something bad might happen to the dog if any pony knows about him. They won't listen to him. They'll think he's a monster like we all did before they met him. Silence fell upon them as they felt the wind in their manes. Sweetie forced some courage to come up and break the awkward tension. It's great up here, she said joyfully. Is this what it feels like to fly? Scootaloo hung her head. I wish I could always come up here, she murmured sadly and flexed her abnormally small wings. Fluttershy nuzzled her. Oh, it's not so bad being a weak flyer, she said soothingly. I wasn't always a good flyer, and I'm just fine. You'll grow into it. Trust me. Thanks, Flutters. But I want to fly all the time, Scootaloo whined. Fluttershy laughed and nuzzled her again. You will. Someday. They shook for a second as Dog came to a halt. What is it, Dog? He He lowered his gaze to the ponies in his palm and narrowed his eyes. Fire. Fluttershy gasped as she noticed a forest fire up ahead. Very faint cries of "Help! Somebody help us!" could be heard, along with the smell of smoking wood charring. "Dog, we have to help in any way she can," she said to the giant, covered them up as he charged into the inferno.